Welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Nick Tasso at the Inefficient 2. Taking a look at pitchers on both DraftKings and FanDuel for Monday's slate, and it's a pretty stacked night of arms.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of similar to Sunday's slate where you have just a lot of guys where you can really choose from. And it's nice when you have slates like this because then you can actually start making multiple lineups and not having to be stuck with a high-priced guy that you just have to play.
Yeah, definitely. And in our first game here, we got the Marlins and the Phillies. Aaron Nola versus Jose Fernandez. And Fernandez is the most expensive pitcher on both sites and kind of as expected. I mean, taking on a weak Phillies offense, I mean, he has the highest strikeout rate on the slate. And he is pricey. I mean, there are some drop-down options, but I do like paying up for the upside. It's a little more accommodable on FanDuel. I mean, DraftKings, obviously, almost $14K is really pricey.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think on DraftKings, I'm probably shying away from him at that price tag, but on FanDuel, when it's only 1,100 more from the next guy, I think I'm going to go with him here. He's just been extremely solid, and he's one of those guys who you can guarantee a 30-plus fantasy point outing on DraftKings from him. So I definitely like him here, and against this Phillies offense, they've been kind of lackluster lately, so he's one of my top options.
Yeah, definitely. Good time favorite here. And I just like him. I mean, we were looking kind of comparing to the last start. I mean, him and Sale were both on the same slate, and obviously it was opposite ends of the spectrum of where they finished. And the one thing I like about Fernandez, I mean, he just that punch out rate is there. I mean, when he gives up a couple of runs, and if that happens, he can usually back it up and kind of get you back above, sea level there with fantasy points.
Yeah, I always like guys who can do that. There's a lot of guys out there who, if they give up a lot of hits and a few runs, then they're kind of done. But Fernandez is definitely not one of those guys. And you look who he's going up against, he should easily get a win against this Phillies team.
Yeah, definitely. And Nola on the other side, not quite sure there's enough upside for me against this Miami offense. And Nola's been a guy who's kind of fallen off the table performance-wise of late. And just on this slate, I think he's kind of an easy fade for me.
Yeah, absolutely. His price tag is way too high, and I just think that he's in a really bad spot here. Ballpark factors against him, and even though the Marlins aren't a great team, he's just been giving up too much. He's given up at least 4 runs in each of his past 5 starts, and he's not one of those guys who's going to strike out batters who will kind of minimize the damage.
Yeah, definitely. Mets and Cubs next one here. 2 lefties on the hill, Steven Matz versus John Lester. And obviously Lester, I mean, really 2 forgetful starts right before the break and one coming off against this Mets team. I actually kind of like Lester as a GPP option just because I think you're going to get him at lower ownership and he has a significant discount from those top guys. The one thing I like here, I mean, you look at this Mets big-time strikeout rate against lefties, 24%. So I do think he kind of relatively is a decent favorite, so I am kind of predicting him to get a win. So I do think just because of the discount, he's worth a look, but obviously just GPP for me.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. He's somewhat okay for cash games for me just because I think he's in a good spot here, even against Mats. I don't see too much out of Mats recently, and I think Lester's in a good spot to get a win here. And I know the Mets scored a decent amount on Sunday, but I just think they're going to revert back to not being that offense that really scores a lot of runs. So I really like Lester here. Again, you got a good discount. It's just not so much sure I want to do in cash. It'll definitely be a roster construction kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely agree. And he's been better off at home this year. The fantasy points, I mean, almost 10 DK points more averaging at home this season. And as you mentioned, that price tag's really nice drop down. And I just think lower ownership people are going to be off of him because they're going to look at his last start against the Mets. They're going to look at his start against Pittsburgh. And I think he kind of bounces back here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really think Mats is struggling a lot lately, and he's averaging a 1.52 whip over his past 4 starts, and he's going to allow a lot of base runners, and I think it's just going to be not an easy win for Lester, but it's definitely something that's attainable.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at this Cubs team, I mean, number 1 in WOBA against left-handers this season, so definitely a tough matchup for Mats, who the strikeout rate has kind of dipped over his last few starts as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's just, to me, Mats at his price tag on both sites are just kind of out of the price range for me. Hasn't been that solid lately, like I said, and it's the hits and the walks that have really caused trouble for him, despite still getting about 5 or 6 strikeouts a game.
Yeah, definitely. Next game here, we got the Orioles and Yankees, and Ivan Nova versus Van Swirly. And this is just a game where I want zero part of the pitching. I'm looking for a lot of offense in Yankee Stadium with two, really average right-handers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you look at both these starters, and they really haven't done anything to impress you in 2016. So I'm really staying away. I know the Yankees' offense hasn't been great lately, but it's still Yankee Stadium, and with a lot of lefties in basically both lineups, there's a lot of balls that could go out of right field fence. So again, staying away. I don't even think they're really worth any upside, even in GPPs.
I definitely agree. And Twins Tigers, next one here. Kind of a similar situation for me. Matt Boyd against Ricky Nolasco. And given the Twins' success against lefties this season, I think Boyd's kind of an easy pass, and Nolasco too against this Tigers team. So, back-to-back games here where I'm just kind of glossing over pitching.
Yeah, I think Nolasco's kind of in a tough matchup here. And his price tag, it's not really high. It's just unless it's dirt cheap, I'm not really going to play him. Detroit still has those bats in there that could really do damage. You could possibly play him in GPPs, but it's just not something I'd really recommend. And then kind of for Boyd, I think his last start was an aberration. I don't think he's going to pitch as well as he did. That was against Toronto. And he kind of racked up fantasy points. And I know he's pretty cheap across the board, but again, it's just not something you really want to do against a lot of righties in that Twins lineup.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's just kind of a hard, we do kind of want to get to some cheaper pitchers, but we'd also don't want to force it on the slate.
No, absolutely. I think there's enough pitchers on this slate that you can really do a lot of things with, and you don't want to kind of throw in a guy just because he's a low salary to kind of even out your team.
Yeah, definitely. And Atlanta and Cincinnati here next. Brandon Finnegan versus Matt Whistler. Reds minus 141 favorites. And I think if there is a cheap guy that I would consider throwing in, I think it is Brandon Finnegan. Obviously, the floor is low and it's a GPP move, but I do like his cheap price tag. You look at this Braves offense, not good against lefties, dead last in WOBA, a 21% strikeout rate. And you also got to look, obviously the ballpark's against him, but this Braves team, not a real big powerhouse ISO numbers. And in fact, they ranked dead last. So I don't mind Finnegan. I think GPP wise, if you want to pair him with a Sale or a Fernandez, you can kind of do so.
Yeah, I agree with you there. You look at Finnegan, and he's pitched better at home. I know it's still a 4.24 ERA, but it's a lot better than what he's been doing on the road. And like you said, against lefty, those Braves have been awful, and Finnegan can kind of neutralize a lot of their lefties. DraftKings, he's only 5,400, and he's a really nice price tag to take a flyer on. Really not sure what'll happen with these two offenses, because I also think Whistler is in a nice matchup, so I'm not really sure who's going to get the win, but I kind of could see how you could play both starters. Obviously not in the same lineup, but I could see how people could tend either one.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, relatively the floors and the ceilings are pretty similar. Whistler a little bit more expensive, but obviously I think both are cheap enough to kind of deploy in GPPs. And I think you can feel obviously the floor is low, but you can kind of feel comfortable given the matchups as far as what the offenses have done this season.
No, absolutely. And you look at Cincinnati, and they're supposed to be a good offense, but last month, 2 months, they've really really disappeared. And I think Whistler's got him at a good point where he could kind of have a nice game despite being at a Great American Ballpark.
Yeah, definitely. And both these guys have pitched against the opposing teams before, and both have pitched fairly well. So I do think you kind of see a lower scoring game, and I think kind of strikeout upside, it's about 5 to 6 on each side there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't know, it's just one of these games where it really could go either way with the pitching.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Padres Cardinals, next one here, Mike Leake versus Christian Frederich. And this one, Leake's probably going to be intriguing to some people. I'm always not the biggest Leake fan, but I can see using him just because I do think he gets a win. I do think he throws a quality start. Obviously, he's coming off a 10 strikeout game against Milwaukee. And you look at this Padres team, they strike out quite a bit too.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I just don't think Leake is a reliable option for DFS purposes. And that 10 strikeouts was just something you'll probably not see ever again from Leake. He's not a huge strikeout guy, and I just think there's going to be a lot of people gravitating towards him after that start. So I'll probably stay away from him. I think his price tag is a little too high for me. But I do agree. I think he's in a good matchup here to get a win.
Yeah, I definitely agree that he's not a reliable option. Really hasn't been for some time. It's just kind of on occasion you'll get that solid league start. Obviously, I never really expect anything from like what he did against Milwaukee, just because he doesn't miss a lot of bats. But when you got guys and teams that strike out at 23+% more rate, I mean, obviously you can manage maybe a tick upwards in that department.
No, absolutely. I mean, he's not a bad play. It's just for me, I think with everyone going to be going towards him, it's just something for GPPs. I probably am going to stay away.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it's definitely just kind of maybe roster construction for me. If he fits and he can get a quality start, I don't mind him as an SP2. FanDuel, there's no upside for me there.
No, I agree with you. DraftKings, he is kind of playable, and I guess I could kind of be talked into playing him in cash if it works for me in roster construction, but he's not one guy I'm particularly targeting.
Yeah. As far as Frederick on the other side, I mean, the Cardinals aren't great against lefties, but I'm also not a fan of his. I mean, just kind of your average left-hander, so just kind of staying away from him.
Yeah, he had a few good starts, but he's definitely come back down to earth, and there's a decent amount of righties in that St. Louis lineup, so he's one guy I'm staying away.
Yeah. Indians and Royals. Next one, you got Edinson Volquez and Corey Kluber. Indians -140 favorites. Kluber's an interesting guy, and I think he is a GPP option on tonight's slate. And I still think the Royals do carry like that name factor of they don't allow a ton of strikeout upside, and they kind of work at hitters, but they really actually haven't been that great against right-handers this season. And I don't kind of mind attacking them in tournaments.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, this really isn't the same Royals team that we've seen the past 2 years, so I really don't mind going with Kluber. He's faced them a couple times recently. He had a bad outing against them at Kauffman Stadium, so it's just one of those things. He was a little bit better at Progressive Field, and I don't know, his price tag on DraftKings to me is a little too high, but I don't really mind him too much on FanDuel.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think for me, I mean, you look at these teams and it's just whether Kluber has it or not. If he's got that strikeout pitch working, I mean, he's a guy who can rack up 8 to 10 strikeouts against anyone. I mean, we saw that with the Yankees, in his start. The Yankees don't really strike out a ton, but when Kluber has it going, that upside's always there.
No, I agree with you there. It's just, I think, like you started with him, I think he's mainly for GPPs, and I really don't mind deploying him a lot in GPPs just because you do have that huge upside.
Yeah, definitely. And Volquez on the other side, I mean, really hard for me to keep targeting against an Indians offense that's still very solid. They're not striking out a ton. And that lineup is just way too deep for me to get through.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to just think how good they've been recently, especially with the emergence of Naquin and Chisenhall actually kind of living up to his potential now. So they've gotten pretty deep, and against righties, it's just I'm staying far away.
Yeah, definitely. Even though Volquez has been better at home, he's just not really a guy, even at that price, to kind of give a look to.
Yeah, and he's crazy just in general, so I'm staying away from him. You never know what might happen with him. He's not as bad as Giordano Ventura, but he's still kind of out there.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing you're not in the general area of him where
he might come find you. No, look at my shirt. He knows where to find me. So, oh well.
Rays and Rockies here next. In core is Tyler Anderson versus Drew Smyly, and definitely kind of a stay away game. Obviously, you're looking at the Rockies projected for over 6 runs, and you look at the Rays too. And the Rays have been really good against lefties this year. A lot of those right-handed bats are going to be targets of mine. So definitely kind of an easy stay away there.
Yeah, I didn't even put the pitchers in my notes. I just wrote the word nope. So we can move on from there. Even though I do like Drew Smyly, but he's been terrible, and putting him in cores, it's going to be really bad.
Yeah, I mean, his home runs per 9 is just insane this year, 1.79. So I can only imagine that goes up after that start.
Absolutely. I look at him almost every time he starts, and it's just another home run here, 2 there, and it's just crazy.
Yeah. Astros A's here, Mike Fiers versus Kendall Graveman. Both are cheap option. Fiers obviously at 5.5 is probably going to draw some intriguing options on DraftKings. Just because he has pitched well against Oakland before, I think there is a reasonable floor against this team that really hasn't been playing well of late. So I can actually see Fiers being a value play on the slate for DraftKings.
Yeah, I agree with you. I put Fiers in as a nice GPP option just because this Oakland office isn't too great, and going up in this ballpark could really help them a lot different than Minute Maid. So I like Fiers here. His price is extremely cheap, and you can do a lot of things with lineup construction there.
Yeah, definitely. And Fires has been serviceable this year, just depending on the matchup. I mean, when you play him against bottom 10 teams, he's panned out. It's just, you look at his starts and what he's done this year, it's been always against top 10 opponents that he kind of falters. So I'm not really a bit worried there, even at that price tag.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, his price tag's so low that you could do a lot of things there. So I like him, and he's almost safe in cash, but I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's borderline. It's one of those cash playable where maybe if I like the bats a little bit more than paying up at pitching, I'll do it. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of that borderline. Could I lean cash? Could I not? Type plays.
That's why I said almost. So.
Kendall Graveman on the other side, and 6,700 on DraftKings. Obviously, not really an option there on FanDuel. Coming off a strong start against Houston. Overall, really though, not a great arm. I think it's just kind of a stay away.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Kendall Graveman, but I was looking at his recent starts when he was seeing teams second time around, both Seattle and the Angels. He saw it twice, and the second time they really put up much better numbers against him. So I kind of really see Houston being similar to them and kind of doing a lot of damage against him.
Yeah, I definitely could see that too. And he hasn't been that great. I mean, 1.43 whip this year. Doesn't have really any strikeout potential, which is always a bonus when you're facing Houston. And when you don't have that, I really don't like that matchup then.
No, absolutely. And his price is, it's only 6,700, but I just think there's cheaper options.
Yeah. Texas and LA here, Nick Tropiano versus AJ Griffin. For me, I mean, I feel like this game in general is just going to be one of those ones where I don't have a ton of exposure to. It's not really the sexiest options on the hill, but they're also, I think they are good enough to kind of tame these offenses that, sometimes the Rangers have been good, but obviously I think more middle of the road describes the two.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you look at this Nick Tropiano going up against Texas, and Texas really isn't the best offense to go up against, but it is at the Big A, so I think he has a little bit of upside here. It's just that price tag, though, is kind of daunting, and I really don't want to go down that path with him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think 7.9 is a little expensive. And there is some strikeout upside, 7K on FanDuel. I don't think there's enough of it there for me to kind of justify using him. And Griffin on the other side, obviously I'm not a big fan of this Angels offense. I mean, they're a middle-of-the-road offense as well. So I think AJ Griffin's going to throw a quality start, but I don't think it's just going to be enough for him to actually be relevant in DFS.
I agree with you there. Do you think there's going to be many people rostering Kyle Loesch since both DraftKings and FanDuel have him listed as the starter?
I don't think so. I mean,
no. Do you think they'll change it?
Yeah, eventually.
I don't understand why Loesch is scheduled to start Tuesday, and he's both of them have the projected starting for this game, but who knows?
Yeah, it's not Loesch. I mean, if it was, we'd be firing up actually, on some Angels bats.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Loesch really isn't that good of a starter, so maybe for Tuesday.
Yeah, definitely keep that in mind. The Loesch alert. White Sox and Mariners last game of the night. Chris Sale versus Wade LeBlanc, and Sale's coming off the start where he disappointed a lot of people. And he's cheaper than Jose Fernandez on both sides, and by both sides I mean DK quite a bit. The one thing with Sale, I mean, the punch-out rate hasn't quite been there at all times this year like it was last year. I mean, it's kind of dropped this year. He's around that 25% range. So it's also a little concerning for me just because in the past, I mean, if we get a Nelson Cruz 2-run homer or something, Sale's always had that strikeout upside to kind of back him. So I do like him tonight. It's a little tougher of a matchup between him and Fernandez, but I do think he's definitely playable in all formats.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think if all prices were the same, I'd probably go with Fernandez. But on DraftKings, I like Sale just because you get that huge discount, and you're not going to get too many games of Chris Sale where he's going to be very low ownership rate. And I think after his outing against Atlanta, he should be really low, and you could kind of utilize him in GPPs, which will definitely help you. And I think he's even safe in cash. And I know you're a little nervous about the righties that the Mariners have, but to be honest, I just don't really see too much offense out of them.
No, I think you mentioned those righties, guys like Franklin Gutierrez and Nelson Cruz, and I mean, you can maybe lump Chris Iannetta in there for another guy who's hit lefty as well. But overall, I mean, they ranked 20th in WOBA against left-handers this year, 21% strikeout rate, and a better ballpark to pitch in. So I definitely could see Sale going out there and having kind of a vintage Sale start. And, he was been solid in the strikeout department before that Atlanta game, and things kind of faltered. So I think he gets back on track, and I do think he picks up a win, even though this White Sox offense has been horrible this year.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think against LeBlanc, they should be able to score a few runs, and it should be enough to give Sale the victory.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not completely going after LeBlanc, but I'm not completely using him either at that price tag. I mean, he's had a couple of nice starts, struggled against Houston, but if he was maybe, 2,000 cheaper, maybe I'd take a look.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's just that price tag, you can't really do much. And going up against Sale, at least if he was going up against some no-name, he might have a small chance of getting the win, but I don't even think that's too likely at this point.
No, I definitely don't either. That's going to wrap things up here with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out DailyFantasyCafe.com for all our great tools and content.